Get your coffee. The happenings this week within the economic markets in the U.S. have been pretty interesting. Retail investors coordinating through Reddit have been purchasing stock mostly through the Robinhood stock trading app to drive up the price primarily of the GameStop retail chain in an effort to turn the tables on hedge fund investors that have been coordinating to drive GameStop's stock down by shorting the stock. As I said, it's pretty interesting, especially in that it has caused some form of unity, or at least we could say agreement among some in Congress on both sides of the political aisle. What will ultimately come of all this remains to be seen, but it is interesting, and it brings us back to the discussion of capital. Money. Money is a big deal for us. And the scriptures actually have a lot to say about the topic of money and wealth. It has been said that God has a lot to say about money, not because money is a big deal to him, so much so as he knows that money is a big deal to us. And it really is. Money is a big deal for us. Money and wealth absorb a lot of our attention, and therefore they can be a massive distraction for us. A focus upon finances can keep an individual from realizing the fullness of all that God actually has for them, such as was the case for the rich young ruler that interacted with Jesus in the Gospels. Those that desire to be rich are often ensnared by many foolish and harmful desires that can be suffocating to an individual, and the love of money can be the root unto all kinds of evil. As a minister of the gospel, called to train, equip, and to what we would call disciple individuals for greater faith in Christ and practice in the Christian faith, I have observed that often the last thing that is saved and sanctified in many people's lives is their wallet or their attachments to their worldly wealth. Over the years, I've spent many hours teaching groups and individuals how to grow in wisdom as it relates to faith and finances. And one of the first lessons I find that every person who wants to grow wise in the area of faith and finances needs to learn, one of the first lessons they need to learn has to do with the issue of ownership as it relates to wealth. Who owns the things that you possess? The question alone might bother you. You may think, the things that I possess are mine, but there is a much bigger issue there than you might realize. And as you begin to grow in a biblical understanding of money, you begin to realize an important truth found in the 3,000-year-old text of the Psalms. Psalm 24 verse 1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and all its fullness." The New Testament book of James also reveals that every good and perfect gift is ultimately from God, from above. And the book of Deuteronomy says that the Lord is the one that gives us the ability, the power to earn wealth. The Apostle Peter writes in one of his New Testament letters that as we have received gracious gifts from God, material gifts, gifts of wealth, gifts of ability, talents, we ought to use them as good stewards of God's abundant grace. So the important beginning point for biblical financial wisdom is that everything I possess belongs ultimately to God, and he has entrusted it to me to be a steward or a manager of his resources. There's a beautiful application of this truth found in Matthew chapter 21 as Jesus prepares to come into the city of Jerusalem for his triumphal entry. Jesus sends two of his disciples ahead of him to a town just outside of Jerusalem, and he tells them to go into the town, and there they would find a donkey tied up with a colt, and they were to loose them and bring them to Jesus. And Jesus tells the two disciples, if anyone says anything to you, you shall say to them, the Lord has need of them, and immediately they will send them with you. These people understood this truth. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The people who owned that donkey and that colt, they understood that those resources were ultimately the Lord's. And if he said the Lord has need of them, they were willing to let those things go. So if you can learn this truth, it will change the way that you see your possessions. And I believe it will begin to transform the way you handle and use wealth as well. Something to think about as we head into this weekend. We'll see you next time.